Bandwidth for First Updates Now is supported by AndyMark. Are you competition ready? Go to andymark.com and keep your team inspired. And by the Blue Alliance. Keep up to date on all live and archived First Robotics events and team stats at thebluealliance.com. First Updates Now is brought to you by Twitch. Fun is now a Twitch partner and offering some awesome subscriber-only benefits. Subscribe today or get a free subscription each month when you have Amazon Prime by linking your account and clicking subscribe.
Hey guys, welcome to FUNalysis. This is going to be our first show of the competition season. I'm really excited tonight about it. We're going to be breaking down some matches. We're going to be analyzing some strategies, some tactics, trying to find some key performance points from the week 0 competitions and share those with you guys to try to create a show that you can learn from and hopefully be a little bit entertained while we're watching it. So I'm Mason Marquis, former Robonaut coach, now just kind of freelancer and running around, spending time with other first teams. And joining me today, we've got 2 new analysts to the show. So first, please welcome Libby Kamen-Drost.
Hi, guys.
And joining me also is Evan Morrison.
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here.
So we're going to get into some matches, but first, few areas of business for you guys. I want to make sure that you tag at First Updates Now with any questions or comments that you would like to discuss during the show. This show is meant to be interactive, so please put out some information, ask some questions, and if you went to a week 0 event, we'd love to hear your comments and your takes on things so we can try to incorporate that in. And then also, free stuff. We're going to be giving away 4 Bad Hawks, courtesy of Team 1720, the Fixed Skiers. So Tyler, can you join us for a second and tell us how our audience can win some free stuff?
Absolutely, Mason, and thanks for bringing me on. And we want to thank Team 1720 for donating the set of Bad Hawks. If you had a chance, we have it up on screen. Go ahead to andymark.com and type these in. These things are sweet, guys. If you haven't seen these, they're an awesome complement to the battery beak. They let you know what the immediate voltage is of your battery without draining your battery, and we've had a lot of great feedback on them so far. So if you're interested in winning, make sure you type in the indicated keyword when prompted, which will be later on during the show. And you do have to follow or subscribe to be eligible. And don't forget that our subscribers get 5 times luck, and we thank everybody for supporting First Updates Now, and thanks to 1720.
Thank you very much, Tyler. Okay, so before we jump into breaking down our matches, let's do a little bit of a roundtable. I'd like to really hear what Libby and Evan, what you guys think about week 0, about this game. You guys have been building robots all season, so I know you're deep into it. You're really paying attention to the details. So Libby, what are your thoughts so far on first power up?
I am actually really excited. So I think one thing I want to make sure, I think a lot of people are noticing this, but analyzing the week 0 is going to be a little bit different than, analyzing a typical competition match, because obviously we did not go to week 0, but if we did, my first instinct as a coach would be like, I do not care about the match score, just test all the things we need to test on the real field. So I'm excited about the fact that we're going to see different, teams trying out all the cool stuff the robots can do. I don't know if week 0 is going to play exactly the way week 1 and 2 and stuff are going to play, because it makes a difference as far as like week 0s are just for fun. So, and it's really a chance to interact with the real field. So I'm a little bit wary of too much strategic analysis on week 0, because you never know what it's actually going to play out like. But I am so excited to look at all of the different robots that we're going to see today and all of the different kind of strategies and all the different ways that teams have solved the same problem. That's always my favorite part of FRC build season and competition season, is like we all got the same problem, but at the same time, we all got totally different answers. So I'm just excited to jump into different matches.
I'm just going to say it the way I feel it.
And I thought it was just so crazy how much over the last couple years the week 0, the official one, has evolved into feeling more like a real competition. Because I totally had the same mindset where it's like, God, this is just like a scrimmage. Teams are coming out to play. And then all of a sudden there's alliance selections and people are teaming up, and they're like, some of these years they played like real strategies. Like, whoa, people are taking this seriously. I've never had a robot done early enough to actually go to one of these events, but I think it's really cool how official it feels. Evan, what are your thoughts on it all?
Yeah, I think, especially having the real field, the real scoring software, the whole shebang really makes it a lot more of a lot more interesting to watch for one, but especially with a game like this, you really can't take anything away unless you have that live score. So I think it's a huge benefit to have the full scoring capabilities. And yeah, I agree with Libby. Like most of the teams out here that are going are probably spending at least the first handful of matches testing their stuff. But by the time playoffs come, at that point you're picking alliances and you're really trying to try out new strategies and play the game. So I was really impressed by how functional all of the robots that were there were, even at some of the harder tasks like scoring on the scale. And I think it's really maybe a better preview going into week one than we've seen in the past. But I think that there's a lot of strategic depth in this game, and we're also going to continue to see that evolve throughout the season. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited for this year.
Yeah, I even watching through all of these playoff matches as teams kind of settled in on an alliance and learned how to use each other. It was kind of fun to see them try different strategies where one robot might be going after the scale and they switch it up and someone else does, or someone picks up defense. And, some of my big takeaways were the field is really small. I mean, these cubes eat up a lot of space. The scale and switches are huge. The robots are big this year. And you see them running around and all of a sudden they don't have very much room to maneuver and get around. So that was, I always knew that would happen, but it's so hard to visualize until you actually see robots trying to drive around and inexperienced drivers crashing into each other. And you're like, wow, it really is tight out there.
For sure. And I think a lot of people also maybe didn't fully appreciate the vision challenge that this year's field presents, coming off of Steamworks and Stronghold, where vision was a pretty big issue. I think a lot of us maybe took the vision for granted this year, and it turns out that when you're on the far side of the scale and you've got the switch and all you can see is the elevator sticking up above the robots, that navigating around the field is actually really difficult if you're not right up next to you. And then the depth perception challenge, because you are scoring on these elements a lot of the time from the side, especially on the scale. And so I think that's a thing that may catch some teams by surprise, that if you have a way to practice that's really helpful. And I noticed that it was affecting teams at week 0.
Yeah, what's interesting is I was thinking about it, and our team, we don't have the room for full field elements where we are. We have a ton of space to build, but not enough space to practice. We built, instead, just to make sure that our robot could accomplish the scale at different heights, we built this very wonky, not a real field drawing, like French cleat system that we could place a scale plate at several different heights, but we didn't actually have it tipping the scale. Because my first train of thought was, what would be really interesting is all of these teams, you're saying vision's a problem, but at the same time, they've been practicing with solid plywood switches and now they can finally see through them, right? But at the same time, I mean, I had not really, other than photos, visualized the intensity of the scale in the middle of the field. And from a coaching perspective, I'm like, oh man, that's going to be a lot to look around. So I feel like coaches and drivers are going to do a lot of what I like to call the velociraptor move, where you have to jump and lean around things. So I think that's going to be very, very prevalent behind the glass this year.
Yeah, I know. I'm one of the coaches for Apex, and we made the decision to go away from driver joysticks this year for several reasons, but one of them was, we're going to both Xbox controllers for both driver and operator, and one of the reasons was because we noticed last year how much of a benefit it was for teams to be able to kind of lean around and move around in their station and see around objects. We actually have a question from chat from Robotier5291 asking, with the vision talk, do we think many future first games will have large elements in the middle of the field? And I think I'm not necessarily sure this is something that first is going to shy away from, but it's certainly something that as it happens more and more, I think teams will get used to. I don't know, Mason, what do you think about that?
I mean, I personally love the big elements. I think from an audience standpoint, it puts on such a big show. It makes first feel larger than life. I mean, I definitely grew up as a student in the era of giant game pieces and giant field elements, and I've never really forgotten how much of an impact that had on me. So I really like it. Seeing the scale out there, I think it's just so big and animated and lights up and moves around. It's dynamic. I'd love it. I hope First does not go away from it, even though I know it poses a lot of challenges and things like just what Libby was mentioning, where teams have a workspace, they have a great shop, but they can't fit an entire scale. I mean, a scale doesn't fit in a classroom or in most school rooms for that matter. So it does pose some issues, but I think it's really, really cool when they're big like that.
Yeah, I mean, I love I have two pieces of it, right? Is that like, I hate building them at home, but I love watching events with like these big, it's part of like the grandeur of coming to an event, right? Is like one of the things, like even week zeros that are unofficial, what I loved about the true official week zero was like, oh my God, it's the real field and the lights and the pretty, like, I think that's gonna be really cool. And I don't know if it's a great idea to continue doing like 6 foot tall field elements every year, because that's a really big strain on teams who need to build a field or have space. But I absolutely love playing on them, absolutely, for sure. We have two questions from chat on this topic, but one specifically is, Mason, what is your freelancing rate? Can you be employed by using Twitch bits?
You know, I don't accept Twitch bits, but I do accept dinner every night, homemade dinner, chocolate chip oatmeal cookies, some nice coffee. That's all it takes to get me in. It's pretty simple, really.
Got it. And our other question is actually two questions. Sorry. One about, just before we get into matches, I guess. The first part is, how important is being able to go under the scale? I have thoughts on that, but I'm gonna let you guys go first. And two is, how important is it to be able to pick up and place on opposite sides of the robot? So I'm gonna let you guys go first.
Yeah, I really, it pairs with what I was trying to say earlier, that the field seems really small. So being able to go under the scale really adds a lot of advantage there. I don't think it's quite as dramatic as 2013, where if you could go under the pyramid, you had a huge extra amount of space to maneuver. But it does make a difference. And I think we'll see some of the teams really take advantage of that, where they will be able to cut across their opponent's null zone because they can zip underneath the scale without worry that they're going to hit another robot. And already we're seeing some really high profile teams coming out with robots that are capable of shortening down low enough to go under that scale.
Yeah, I think one hidden benefit of that as well is when you're getting onto the platform at the end, you don't know which way the scale is necessarily going to be tipped. And I think we'll see in some of the matches that we analyze that it can get in the way of a team trying to get up onto ramps or just up onto the platform, because there is not a lot of room there. So I think being short is definitely going to be a visible benefit, but it's by no means a make or break. Certainly, having capability that you wouldn't necessarily have by being tall is also a benefit. You really that height with the scale down is, I think, like 44, 45 inches, something like that. And so that knocks 10 inches off your maximum robot height if you're trying to get under that, which when you're trying to reach up really high is a huge impact. So it's something that I think a lot of the top teams have designed around because they know that they want that capability, but I don't know that it's necessarily a thing that every single team should be designing around, because, if you're trading off the ability to be able to place on the scale versus being short, maybe that's not a worthwhile trade-off. Maybe you just, go out and take the hit and say, we're going to practice it and we're going to be able, to make our way around that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was actually the point I wanted to think about too, is, spoilers, in my match, it plays into it, but getting up onto that platform, watching teams at the week zero kind of like scoot around, try to get up to the platform, and then their top of their elevator would hit the scale and hit it in a way, like in one case it was benefiting their team, and then their own robot punched it back up and they lost it for a little bit. And so it's like, that's maybe not the greatest idea. I think it's playing a lot into getting up onto the platform, especially when you have teams who have the ramps falling down to the sides. So I think that's just something to be careful, mindful, practice with your drivers about, is when that scale is at that lowest point, making sure that you can still get around it and get around it carefully. I think that's probably pretty important. So I think we have one other question, and I think maybe we just lightning round yes, no this. With regard to vision paths, as far as sightlines on the field, do you think we'll see a cover driver station scoring again like 2011? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. To elaborate, I think, games where the robots to grade and perform worse because of a scoring element just aren't good. It doesn't look good to anyone. It makes the game look not as good. So I hope we avoid that.
I agree. I think.
All right. It's consensus. So when we're all on GDC next year, we can enforce that one.
Oh, so. It's going to be great. Water Game 2019 done.
Yeah. So yeah, let's jump right into watching some matches. I think we got a good preview of what's going to be coming up next. I'm going to go ahead and start with this. I watched a lot of the week 0. I watched some of the streams for some of the other events around the country, but the official week 0, I think that had the highest quality action going on. It was the most organized. It was really easy to follow because we got the official overlays and lights on the field. And so I think it's really cool that we can kind of get used to seeing what's there. To me, the finals 3 match was really interesting. And I thought there were a lot of nice actions that I really wanted to point out and kind of show the world and expose some of the strategies that can be created in first power up. A little primer to this, these finals matches went to 4 matches because they had a tie in the first one. And then I think blue won the second and red won the third. And then so they had to go ahead and play a 4th match. So they had a lot of opportunity to kind of bounce off of each other, explore different strategies. And even throughout the quarters and semis, these teams were evolving, and we'll be able to see some of these teams replay in Libby and Evan's videos as well. And then the other key point about this match before we get started in it is that it really comes down to being a 2 versus 2 match. There's 3 robots on each alliance. On the Blue Alliance, we had Airstrike 78, Morpheus 58-13, and the Tigers 54-59. On the Red Alliance, 238, the Crusaders 56-87, Outliers, and 33-23 Potential Energy. Now, 54-59 and 33-23, kudos to them for being out there, but you could tell their robots were just falling apart by the end of this. It's hard to have a robot ready before bag day. It's hard to have a robot ready for bag day. To get it done a week early, too, is an insane ask of teams. So it's no surprise that the robots aren't out there at full functionality. So they're just kind of limping along through these matches. They don't really provide a lot of extra ability. So we can kind of view this as a 2 versus 2 match, which I think is a really interesting way to look at it, considering how much the different alliances get done inside of this match. So we'll go ahead and cut to the video here. And just to start it off, watch the Red Alliance during the autonomous mode here, because what I really want to highlight is how they get a perfect autonomous for a qual match. Now, in eliminations, the RP bonuses don't really add anything to it, but it's still good to recognize how easy it is for this autonomous mode to work. I mean, the robots barely have to move. They all 3 of them drive forward. Outliers score 1 cube on the switch. That gets them the switch control. They get all 3 crossing the line, and so they have an RP bonus right there if this was a qual match. Well, it's not. So right away, coming into teleop mode, watch 238 across the bottom of the field here. They zip across and they're going to go play defense. And they ended up doing some really impressive amount of double defense over here. And I think that's a really impressive early attack. They almost knock the cube out. They throw 58-13 Morpheus kind of off their game. Then they back right into Airstrike 78, really just creating that chaos and throwing people off. Now, I want you to pause it right here and kind of look at the Blue Alliance. 2 robots are trying to score up on the scale. 78, really good score over here. Morpheus, in some matches, they score a lot. I think in this one, they were starting to have some trouble. But what's really interesting is that one robot really fills up a big part of that null zone. 78 right there is eating up most of the floor space. So Morpheus, they got a cube. They're up high. They want to score that cube because they're an ambitious team. And so what they do is they go and they try to score in the nearest spot to them, which is on the side. Unlucky for them, though, is that 238, the Crusaders they're a mean machine right now. They are out to play defense. It is their entire goal to disrupt right now. And they're going to take advantage of this situation. So we're going to hit play. And in the next 10 seconds or so, Crusaders is going to get a really good hit on a tall robot here. And it's a completely legal hit. They are outside the null zone right there, getting them good. And then as soon as they enter the null zone, 238 gets out of there and backs away. Lucky for Morpheus, it didn't knock him over, but it could have been really bad right there. Let's see. We're going to roll back the clock a little bit here and go back to about, let's say like 109 here. And this is about when the scale is even between the two alliances. And I think what's really interesting about this is the Red Alliance just has Outliers scoring on it. The Blue Alliance has 2 robots with 78 airstrike, and Morpheus put him up there. 78 right here misses their cube, but in general, it's pretty evenly matched. Outliers is they're able to just work by themselves. They started to get in this routine. They're going to be doing this, and I think this is what you're going to see is when teams are just left alone, they can generate a lot of points. It might even work better than an alliance where 2 robots are trying to work together, but they're bumping into each other. Meanwhile, this 238 robot is over there. They're going to go and get the switch right away, the away switch, their opponent's switch, which is going to negate the Blue Alliance from being able to generate points. So right away, the Red Alliance is able to kind of start running away with the score because they're going to have the trifecta. They're going to own all 3 elements of the game. And the Blue Alliance doesn't make a response to it. It takes 50 seconds for the Blue Alliance to come back and get that red switch. And I think it's mostly because they had a pre-planned activity where they wanted to go and try to tackle the scale. And because they were looking at that, they forgot about their own home switch. So we'll go ahead and hit play here and kind of watch it as 238 makes a really quick and easy switch takeaway. And it's going to be a while, and we're not going to wait the whole while before that comes back and gets to them. Meanwhile, 58-13 over here, they go and play defense. We'll roll this back a little bit, actually put it back at like 100 seconds left on the clock or so. And I think this is a really interesting place of defense. This one really made my eyes open right here, is go ahead and hit play here and watch 58-13 set up on the right side of the field. They're in blue bumpers, and boom, right there, they're playing defense on Outliers. Outliers is, I was just saying how productive they were being whenever they were left alone. Now they're getting played defense on where they collect the cubes. And this is a place on the field where I think a lot of people didn't recognize that you could play defense. And it actually seems to be a very effective one. I don't think Outliers really expected that. Now, if you were to practice that a little bit, train it up, I think you could be very, very effective. And if you keep watching that area, you'll see that Morpheus just hangs out there. Their goal now is to try to slow down Outliers. And they're kind of playing defense on their partner, but they're really set up waiting for somebody to come back to try to get more cubes there.
One thing you can see, I mean, this really goes back, Mason, to talking about how crowded the field gets when you get a lot of robots around there and how much space that switch takes up. Outliers' partner is just kind of hanging out up north of the switch, and so that makes Morpheus's defense that much more effective because Outliers now has to coordinate getting past their own partner, and so Morpheus is effectively playing double defense there just because by being in the area in that platform zone, they're locking out Outliers from a very large portion, and it takes them some time to coordinate with their partner with 3323 to get past them to get back over to their power cube zone to get some protected cubes. So that's something to be watching out for, that if you pick strategic points on the field, much like the defense between the airship and the wall last year, you can really force a lot of time out of your opponents by making them have to go a long way around the field and potentially through dangerous protected areas as well.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I mean, we talked about the layout of this field earlier, but I think the fact that you have to, there have been games in the past, 16, a little more than 17, right? But there have been games in the past where it's like, I'll do my thing in my own lane, you'll do your thing in your own lane, and team number 3 is going to do their own thing, and there's plenty of room for all of us. And I don't think that this game with the scale in the middle and all the protected zone on the other side really lends itself to like, oh yeah, my partner's just going to do what they said they were going to do and not worry about it, right? Is that we need to really be careful about pathing and coordinated pathing, especially when you've got defense around that platform zone. I think that's going to be really important. Obviously, in a week 0 where no one's used to the field yet, you can give people a pass on not understanding it. But I think going forward, it's like, oh wow, that's a really close corner for 3 tall, tippy robots to be in. Even last year, a lot of robots were so low to the ground, it wasn't a big deal. But think about the impact that a fallen partner in that tiny little lane is going to have on potentially how the rest of your match is going to go.
Yeah, and I think, Libby, like that, not only is it about where talking with your partners where you go from place to place, but also your scoring destinations change all the time. And if you're going with the classic FR3 strategy of each robot kind of does their thing and sticks to their plans and everything's going to be okay, you're going to miss out on something. And that's exactly what's going on with the Blue Alliance right now in this match. The switch has been taken. It was taken, way back at like 112 or I'm sorry, 102 left in the match. Here we are at 51 still on the clock, and they haven't gotten it back yet. Blue has still not gotten their own switch because they're all playing to the strategy that they said. They probably said, Airstrike, you're going to go score on the scale. Morpheus, you're going to go play D in this new place. That's really going to throw them off their game. And our other partner's struggling right now. Tigers isn't working very well. And that communication loss of Tigers isn't taking care of the switch because they're struggling. Everyone else is doing what they were planning to do ahead of time, and now you've lost a huge amount of points, 50, 60 points of lost time that your switch hasn't been going.
Totally. This is one of those things where I'm so excited and also so nervous about this game, is that it's so deeply dynamic in that 2 minutes that it's like there's so much to keep track of. So I'm both excited and terrified for that.
Yeah, I mean, the coaches really have to be back there talking more than ever. I think there has to be really good communication and really good honesty between the different coaches of a team recognizing when they're struggling to complete a task, because everything is so time-based. It's going to be different, it's so often thinking like, oh, I got it. Don't worry. I'll take care of it. I got it. And if you're not getting it, you have to be honest about that and tell your partners, I need help. I can't get the switch back. Please come back home for 20 seconds or whatever it takes to get it back. It's going to be interesting back there behind the glass. I think it's going to be really fun.
For sure.
To wrap up, how this match concludes here, 58-13 playing that defense over there, and what that has allowed is Airstrike continue to score on the top of the scale, and now the scale is actually even back up because Outliers was really slowed down, I think, considerably by that defense, and that allowed the Blue Alliance to kind of catch back up on the scale. It's neutral right now as we watch the match, and then here at the end. Actually, we just like roll it back just a few seconds here. We'll go to about 38, 40 seconds left on the clock. And I want you to watch Outliers on the Red Alliance. That's the far scale. They really start to struggle placing their last few cubes here. And I think this ends up being something that some teams paid attention to that others maybe missed, is that putting cubes on top of cubes ends up being a little bit more tricky, and how you place those cubes early in the match can really come back to bite you. It's almost 3 times in a row that Outliers picks up a cube and drops it, and it really just seems to be rolling off. Maybe there's some elements because the scale is moving back and forth. It's dynamic. It's getting hit, bouncing around, but it really showed me like, wow, it's not straightforward to keep on scoring on top. And then, there's one other thing I want to highlight here. We're going to go back to about 60 seconds of the match, and that's the ability for 238 to come and take care of the vault. You get those 5 points for every time you put a cube in the vault or into the exchange and then scored in the vault. That it could be some serious point generation. And 238 really shows off that they're built to do this job. This goes back to how I started the description of the match. This is really a 2v2 match, and all of a sudden, the Red Alliance. The Red Alliance is everything here. 238. They're playing defense. They're scoring in the opponent's switch, and then they're going over and taking care of the vault and putting in tons of cubes in the vault, just one after another. They really just destroy it. Meanwhile, their partner Outliers is able to kind of handle just the scale, and they do a good job keeping the scale. So 2 robots playing all 4 scoring elements of the game in this match. If they had that third robot moving around and helping them out, I think it could be even more exciting on there. Do you guys have you put a lot of thought onto like when you think the optimum time to get the vault? I think most teams are going to go after a levitate at least. If boost and force are worthwhile, may change from match to match, but do you think that's something you do really early on the match, or do you save it towards the end like the Red Alliance here?
So we've actually got a bunch of, I don't even want to call it simulation, so just sort of like math running on 1923, where depending on where the match is at a given point, what do you want to play? We've actually gotten more in depth. I don't know what it is about this particular challenge that is like igniting my kids' excitement for math and modeling, but they really love
That's
it.
great.
And I know, I'm in for it. But there's this, I don't have it on this computer. Otherwise I would send it to Tyler and share and explain. But it's been this whole kind of simulation modeling of if the score is at this point, is boost 2 or 3 even worth it at all ever, and like what are the different kind of point values. I think teams are going to forget that you need to do some vault points. Let's say you're just going for levitate, but you're a little bit behind. You might actually get an advantage by doing some just standard, vault points, even if you don't necessarily play the boost or the force at the correct time. I think, again, falling back on what I said earlier, is that teams are really excited about just like trying stuff on the real field, that I think people are kind of ignoring vault strategically, but I think it's going to play in more than we saw in week 0 going into official competition.
Yeah, I'd almost say that I agree with Libby. It's really match state dependent. I saw a number of teams that would just start out and their whole thing is just running vault cycles. And I think that's when you run the vault, is actually going to change significantly over the course of the season, depending on cube availability, etc. Because for the most part right now, everybody's just running the 10 starting cubes in your power cube zone, which makes a lot of sense. They're right there. But those are also protected cubes, and maybe cubes that are worth saving until later in the match when you need access to cubes that your opponents can't get to. And so I think that will start to change the dynamic of the game as well. In general, I kind of felt like a lot of teams did the vault a little bit too early at week 0, and some of that, as Libby said, may just be teams are trying things. That's their main game plan, is to finish the vault, so they're going to want to make sure that they can do it and take the opportunities they have on the real field. But as we'll see when we talk about my match, that there's some critical decisions about where to place cubes when, and decision to go place a cube in the vault as opposed to somewhere else, because everything else in the match besides the vault, all the switches and the scale, are time-based accumulation points. The decision to go do an action that's going to take some time to put a cube in the vault as opposed to putting it somewhere else may be a negative play for you, because you're losing out on points or you're losing out on advantage. So I'm not sure that there's a real set in stone right time to play the vault, but right now I'm sitting on, you probably want to do it almost as late as possible, after you've focused on getting and maintaining an advantage on the other scoring elements.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, I think, what we're seeing for sure now, and we'll see how that evolves over a couple of weeks of play. Mason, we have some questions from chat about match number 1. Some of these are just in general. Our first
All right,
one,
we'll bring them on.
Let's do it. Our first one is, can we talk about the viability of an every bot design and how a team would be able to maximize qualification match and playoff success? And I'll let you guys take it, but I hope my match can help talk about that too. So maybe we can lead into it, but go for it, guys. What do you think? I think that everybot's so viable. Very, very, yes, definitely.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board. I think that robot really just exposed so much. It was such a simple idea, well executed, but not complex. But in this game, like, you see how much time teams spend trying to pick up a cube off of the ground, getting bounced around, and this everybot it gets them so easy. It's such a wide capture envelope. It's playing downfield. If they just practice that a lot, they'll be able to dump them in that opponent's switch, and the scores run away whenever you're not generating points on your own switch. So I think that robot, if 90% of the teams built that robot, I think we'd have the most competitive year in first we've ever seen.
I think, you hit the nail on the head there. The key is speed, right? This whole game is largely about speed, and the everybot design is such a simple way to get really, really fast at one aspect of the game that teams that may have built for the scale but cannot do it nearly as quickly as they could have done an everybot design may find themselves wishing that they'd gone for the everybot, just because the rate at which it can score cubes can really make an entire match get out of hand very quickly. And it doesn't have the ability to pick cubes up off the floor and put them on on something, but it can run the vault, right? And we were just talking about that. If you go dump a boatload of cubes in your opponent's switch and empty out a portal, right, and you do it so quickly that your opponents are spending lots of time trying to recover from that, now you've got time in the match to go back and do your vault, right, with that one robot. Whereas if you do it early and then try and take control, you may be losing out on points. But I think the speed at which the every bots that have practiced it and are ready for that strategy is going to take a lot of teams by surprise and really throw a wrench in a lot of teams' plans.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting when you're talking about, I wish more teams would do it and we'd have a really, competitive season, is I think I wonder how many teams are going to have this big, impressive, flashy, showy scale scale. God, calling the scale something that was also a different game thing 2 years ago kills me.
Yeah, we have the same problem.
So a big, tall robot. We're gonna call it that. A big, tall robot. Yeah. Now and then throughout the season, talking about rebuilding down towards an every bot to potentially be more like, let's say you're a scale bot, but you're not the best scale bot in the world. Oh, well, what about some adjustments for, say, championship to make you a better partner for somebody else rather than trying to run the show your own? I think that'll be interesting. I want to see. I have a theory that there are going to be more teams transitioning to every bots than there are going to be unbagging for the first time with every bots. But speaking of that, being a better partner, our other question from chat is Vault Switch Specialist ever worth a #1 overall pick, or is the #1 pick always the best scale robot, assuming that the Alliance captain can also do the scale? I think we've kind of talked about that, but I think there's definitely a situation in which the depth of field means that you want like the best every bot type of robot. I also think there's going to be really good scale robots who can do switch quickly. My favorite thing currently on our team, we watched the Mars reveal video, and what we're calling the dumpy hands, like this thing on the back, like just a very easy like drop into the switch. I'm not sure that it's necessarily exclusive that a good scale robot is also a bad switch specialist, but I get the question, right? Does the every bot ever become the #1 overall pick? I'm not sure. I think it depends on depth of field, right, guys?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things have to line up. Like if there's sometimes you make a pick because you want to take the other most competitive team there and take them off the table. You'd rather play with them than against somebody. But, this is a game about specialties. And if you are a specialist at doing the scale really well, you would benefit a lot from a partner who's a specialist at just doing the switch. And I think it's extremely likely that a great scale robot partnered with a great every bot style robot could go and make it to Einstein and have a serious run at a world championship. It's totally reasonable, and it's I'd be surprised if we didn't see it at least on one division at championship.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that the benefit that you get from a vault switch specialist is massive, especially at events that don't have as deep of a field, because you're gaining for one, speed, right? But the other thing that you don't have to worry about as much is playing against an alliance of two good switch and vault specialist robots against two good scale robots. And there's a point at which there's two switches on the field and there's only one scale, and they both gain you the same number of points. And so yes, if you have two scale robots, you're going to take the scale most likely. But if you do that and you lose both switches, you may not be coming out ahead in that match. And so there's, I think, an argument to be made that the vault switch specialist gives an alliance a lot more flexibility than going with the second best scale robot, because there is only one scale.
Yeah, I mean, two switch bots dominating the switches and playing a little bit of strategic defense, I think could take out a really high-profile alliance. This is going to be one of those years where upsets can definitely be a thing. But let's get back to some action. Libby, I think you've got a match lined up for us that maybe exemplifies some of these comments that we're making. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. I'm really excited that was the question that we got because while I did not pick a playoffs match, I picked one that I found that Alliance was being very, very smart about where they're putting their cubes, both Switch and Scale. And like we were talking about earlier, when do you place things in the vault and when do you actually activate the vault? So I'm looking at Qualification. I almost said quarterfinal. Nope. Qualification. Reading is hard. Match number 10 from the official week 0. And so on the Red Alliance here, we have 8-11, 49-05, and 56-87. On blue, we've got 61-53, 58, and 23-42. What I found super cool about this match specifically was we ended up with I think we need to get this match on, but basically the TLDR of this match, I think Tyler's trying to get our match pulled up. The TLDR on this match is that Red is so smart with where they place cubes, specifically dealing with the vault, and not using any additional cubes they don't need, right? So a lot of teams wanted to place things that, I want to see if I can get like 5 billion cubes on the scale. But if you already own the scale, do you really need to keep dumping and dumping into the scale? So this particular match does a really, really good job of bringing, the one alliance together. They're focusing on each of them having their own thing. And it's not quite like we talked about, Mason, everybody doing their own thing in their lane, but it's really, really neat. And I'm excited. So as we start the match, there's nothing really fancy or special happening in Autonomous here. It's truly, they cross the line. Nobody puts anything anywhere, which is fine. It just does its thing. I also, unrelated, very much dig the little power-up noise before the match starts. But so we've got Red gets 1 across, blue gets 2. It is what it is. Everybody's getting auto. I don't think we really need to talk about auto strategy before teams even bag. It is really cool when their stuff works on the field. Then we go into tele-up here, and Red just takes right onto the scale, right? You see 56-87 going up there with that scale, and their opponents are trying super hard, not making it, just miss. But if you look for a second, pause if you could, Tyler, and look at what their partners are doing over by their alliance wall. Both of their partners, and it is a little confusing because 4905 was in blue bumpers. So what we have here is both of the red teams going into the vault. They've already placed in the switch. There's 1 in the switch. You can see on the scoring overlay that they already own both the things that they need to own to get points. And so they're just like, all right, let's go for vault. Let's go for points. We can keep moving through the match, I think, Tyler. So if we keep going, I think, what did I say? My notes are impossible to read, but we've got our 56-87 going up onto the scale. They get their 2. They're like, we're good. We're pretty happy. And you see them a little bit confused at the moment about what they're going to do. But this is actually interesting there. If you pause, Tyler, again, if you see the blue robot, went for a cube in that kind of their cube zone, or not the cube zone, the blue robot on the platform. Sorry, Tyler. I'm not being very clear. I'm the worst.
The bumpers make it really confusing.
Sorry, producer.
And the
Tyler.
lights change every match, so
yeah.
it's
And the platform's the wrong color. The blue robot that's on their platform, they went and they got one from lined up against a switch, but where are they going with it? What are you doing in the middle of the platform? And I think 56-87 is really taking an advantage here, is going, oh, well, like, I can just, come in here and get some more cubes. So they got one for their scale. We can pick back up. So blue is moving along. At this point, it's now 90 seconds left in the match, and blue just got ownership of their own switch, whereas red is just killing it, placing some things in the vault. I think they ended up with a total of 5 cubes there. Now, Tyler, if you could pause one more time. I'm focusing on red here, not to say that blue was doing a bad job, but just because I really like the way red played this. If you look at red right now, this is where in Mason, in your last match where you were talking about gumming up the lanes, red, honey, what are you doing over here? What are all 3 of you doing in the same area of the field? Why? So it seems like there's a little bit of confusion. But what I want to point out, what I want to point out in a really cool way, though, is that I don't like the way that they gummed up together. But if you notice, red's like, we're good. We've got control of the two things that we're going to be getting points for. At this point, we're halfway through a match, and there's literally almost no way for blue to catch up.
Right. I mean, this is like every coach has to get so good at mental math, because you see 121 minus 33, 90 points ish. There's 73 seconds left on the clock. So the other alliance can't generate, enough points fast enough if they're at least controlling one thing in this game. At that point, you can change it. Your entire mindset is, I just have to control one thing and they're not going to be able to beat me. At least at the scale switch game. There's always Volt and hanging to add in another effect to it, I suppose.
Yeah, like that.
But understanding those breakpoints and being able to do that mental math and figure out, okay, this is the current match state. What is my best shot at actually winning the match? And the answer may be, we need to go take one objective back, play hard-nosed defense, and do everything we can to get all the climbs that we can get, and just hope. Right, and mathematically, that's the only way, or the best way, that we have to come back in, because realistically, taking both objectives away from an alliance that has been able to get them faster than we can is going to be extremely difficult.
Oh yeah, this is where I very much enjoy this play, as far as you're so far ahead, and this is where, with my team, like I said, we were doing all this modeling. There are, in so many different versions of our simulation, unfortunately, a version where you just can't catch up. Like, there is a way that if you don't play the beginning of your match smart, you may not make it back up. And so I absolutely, other than the pathing issue here on red, I really like that they're just like, we know we have control. Our opponents are not going for the scale or for our switch, so let's just focus on getting those vault points. I think we can continue with our match here, Tyler. So we're just about halfway through. And here's my favorite thing. If you watch 5687 careening across the field, I'm pretty sure, not that I can be in their driver's head, but they went, oh, wait, we could totally go get their switch now. Like, I think they just didn't really, they're already winning. But if you look, they're just like, oh, well, we could go all the way over here and we could get this back too. And so I think that's pretty neat. It's a smart thought, because at this exact same time, blue's going for, they just got one cube onto that scale. They're trying to tip it back in their favor. So it's like, okay, you want to play? Let's play. Let's go.
And when I previewed this match, I love that move that Outliers do, where they get 3 or 4 cubes scored really, really fast there, because they just kind of park along that line and just grab, turn, drop, grab, turn, drop, grab, turn, drop. And all of a sudden that switch is filling up really fast.
Yeah.
That is such a smart play on their behalf. And so actually, thank you for pausing, Tyler. I was going to ask you to, when we were just talking about interacting with the scale, take a look at that left side. This is what we were talking about, is if you're going up for, your climb and the scale is tipped, you're going to clothesline yourself on it. And so that's something that's a little bit worrisome for that. What I just thought was so impressive, the end of this match is beautiful. You get these two red teams up on 4905. They make their way up onto the ramps, and if you notice, we can play back into it. I think what's cool is this team clearly has independent actuation for each side, and that's something that I remember playing in 2007 was such a pain when you had one team with 2 ramps and one ramp that was one continuous, and it was like, oh, you didn't make it, bye. And so I love the independent actuation here. That's really all about endgame that I want to point out. But what I think is so interesting is just the way that red played this. And if you go back just a little bit, I don't have a timestamp, but as they realized they were safe, right? They made this switch. That's actually perfect, Tyler. Thank you, producer of the year. They realized they had their scale, their switch, and their opponent's switch were neutral. They only had one cube in for boost, but they still used it. I mean, there's enough of a margin here where you don't even have to worry about boost, but they definitely were working on getting stuff into the vault, and I'm glad that they used it. I think it speaks, Evan, to what you're talking about, is not that there's a point differential here that's going to make a difference, but playing power-ups later might actually be helpful. So I think that could be not quite in this match, but I think that could be really great to think about, hey, here's a team who spent a bunch of time. They knew they had what they had. now let's get stuff in the vault and let's see what we can make out of that vault. Vault cubes, whatever you want to call it, the Connect 4 box, but it's not 4. What can we do with this, and how can we increase our score? I think that was played pretty smart here.
Yeah, and along those lines too, it's if a team is going to be the ramp bot like in this match, and they're going to be spending some amount of time, 30 seconds or so, sitting there deploying their ramps. If they're going out there and getting a force earlier in the match, then they've kind of made up for that time that they're spent not contributing to scoring on a scalar switch, because they're using the force to get those points back. And so by dominating your power-ups at the end of the match, you're kind of mitigating the need to be scoring up until the buzzer so that you can get those big bonus points by lifting somebody.
Yeah, I remember back in 2007, we would go to deploy our ramps at like 40 seconds.
You were on 190 back in 2007?
I was on 190 that year.
Yeah, one of the good lifters that year.
And so we would our game plan, we would always go back at 40 seconds to deploy the ramps, to make sure that we were there and that our partners had as much time as they needed to get up on them. This year it's a little bit different because you can't drop anything that big until the 30-second mark hits, but you can at least get up on the platform and be ready to go and hit the button at that time. And that's critical. That 4905 does that right here, and that's all enabled by the fact that their alliance worked together earlier in the match to make sure that they had a lead, make sure that there wasn't any other pressing scoring that had to happen at that point in the match, that they could afford to go drop the ramps and be ready for the end game there. And I think it also speaks to what we were talking about with when to do the vault, right? They played this so smart by making sure that they secured 2 objectives early on in the match, and they were not under threat of being taken away, right? It's 2 cubes to 0 on the scale. It's 1 cube on the switch, but their opponents are all focusing on their own switch and maybe trying to take the scale back. And they spend the entire middle of the match just working on the vault before outliers go and just to put the nail in the coffin, go take control of their take away their opponent's switch as well. But they played that without overspending cubes to hold objectives, but also recognizing that they didn't need to because those objectives were not under threat yet, and that is the time to go build up your future points in the vault. So it's overall just a really well executed match from Red, and it shows.
Yeah, I mean that's the entire reason I picked this match, right? Is that it's such a good play of like, we have what we have. We don't need to continue just like rocketing things into the scale because we know we own it. So let's just go do something else with our time. Let's make sure that 4905 doesn't lose anything out from having to set up 15 seconds before endgame. Let's make sure we're caught up. This was a really well played match. Like, I mean, even when we talked about week 0 earlier, we were saying, oh yeah, like people spent the first couple of quals shaking things out. Like, no, this was a really well played early match at this event. And I thought it was just fantastic.
So a couple questions coming from the chat. One that's kind of relevant to what we've been talking about is from Mr. Bacon Penguin. What are your thoughts on the importance of triple climbing in both qualifications and eliminations, either with some ramps or some variation of lifting platforms or double climbs like what 148 and 118 have shown in their release videos? Libby, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think I haven't fully formed a ton of like perfect thoughts on triple climbing. I think it'll be really my concern really as far as climbing is the ranking points. I think teams are thinking about like the big flash in the show of like, oh, we're gonna climb, it's gonna be awesome, and it's like, well, actually, it's gonna be awesome because you're gonna rank higher, and that's where my weight to triple climbing comes. I'm not entirely certain that point bonus is going to matter as much in playoffs, where we might see these truly dominant matches where the scores are super high. I think it's obviously going to make a difference when matches are close. It's going to be similar in that regard to how hanging was in 2017, right? It's like, oh, maybe they're perfectly equal on this score, but it's all about that climb at the end. But I think my concern is more on the ranking point. Maybe it's the being a district team or being a team that's is in that kind of mid tier is like, okay, let's like rank super high with this and try to put some weight on that. But I'm not sure that I'm entirely fully decided on how I feel about triple climb being super important. Evan?
I think it'll be really, really important later on in the season, as we start getting more cubes getting placed places, and as more teams start being able to have the simple drive straight autos, and so the auto run and the auto quest RP is a little bit more commonplace. That the triple climb in qualifications is what's going to really start rocketing those teams up in the rankings. And additionally, when you start getting to the top levels of competition, right? Any game is a resource game, and in this game, the resources are time and cubes. And so I think that there is a possibility of running out of cubes at the highest levels of play, and so being able to have the teams that have the difference between needing to use the levitate to get their triple climb versus the teams that are lifting other robots and either having provisions to allow somebody to climb next to them or lifting all three and getting the triple climb that way. They're buying themselves 3 extra cubes, and they are buying themselves some time as well. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that dynamic also plays out as we progress through the season.
Yeah, I just want to note to something that's being asked in chat. This, if you look at the score screen, it does not show the triple climb. It appears that at this event they were just trying to test the software for scoring, so they weren't actually scoring triple climbs. I don't want to say correctly. Obviously, they were doing what they needed to do for first field testing, but they were not applying triple climbs to the score screen. It seemed like maybe just not something they were prioritizing on their tablets.
I believe this was the first time that it even was really attempted, and
yeah.
I don't know the official word, but from what I heard, there was really only 1 or 2 trained refs at that event at that point, and so it was more just the referees weren't really prepared for this scenario.
Yeah, what do you mean more than 30 end game points?
Right, and I don't think they actually succeeded in pulling it off again later in the competition as well. And it's entirely possible that after the score screen went up, they went back and they actually updated it and gave those teams the RP. But at the time when it went up, I think there was maybe a little bit of confusion about exactly what was supposed to happen at that point. So hopefully also a good learning experience, right? And understanding this is also why First supports the week 0 with the official field, and is so that they learn these kinds of things and what needs to be prioritized and enforced from a referee training standpoint to make sure that those aren't missed.
For sure. I just wanted to address because it seems like chat didn't understand why this screen right over here was only 1 climb. So that's why, in case you're a little bit confused. So another question we have here from the chat is, teams like 2471 and 118 have shown that they can place 3 to 4 cubes high on the scale. So the scale plate, cube, right? How important do you guys think that it is that teams can do multiple layers, and how high is too high?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too worried about it. I don't think too many teams should be. If we're really lucky, I think we'll get to Einstein, and it will be like in 2005, where the teams just kept stacking higher and higher than anyone had ever seen before, and it was super exciting. And these robots that had built all this technology in really early in the season were rewarded, but that was 6 robots out of the thousands that competed that year. I think at most tournaments, it's just not going to end up being that big of a deal. But I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm still on the fence on this one, and I think a lot of it's going to depend on how the game actually ends up playing out, because there are a finite number of cubes, and when you start getting to the point where you're placing a 3rd row, there's so many cubes on the scale, right? And you have to assume that if an alliance is placing a 3rd row, it means that the other alliance also has enough cubes on there to warrant them needing to place a 3rd row to maintain control. So at that point, you're talking, 6 cubes minimum to a layer, 2 layers, that's 24 cubes, right, being used just on the scale. That's more than a third of the cubes available, and there's other places to be using cubes. So I think some of it is that these top teams are hedging their bets that they may need that capability at the highest levels of play, but I tend to agree with Mason that the level of competition and the way that the game specifically has to play out in order for that scenario to come to fruition is just something that we're not going to see very often.
Yeah, I think that's the total unicorn, right? It's like it's so awesome to think about designing for that, and I think that adds to the engineering challenge, but that match is going to be a total unicorn out of the season. But if you get there, you'll be ready for it.
Yeah, and that's what those teams are doing, right? They're looking all the way up there and saying, if we can have this capability and somebody else doesn't, or if somebody else has this capability, we need to have it too, right, in order to maintain that high level of play.
There's one more question here I want to tackle from Mick last. Libby, you kind of mentioned this too in your talk about robots hitting the scale. How often do you think the scale is going to spear robots this season?
Too often.
Frequently.
Frequently. Many. I think that what's going to be tough is like so often it's going to happen. It actually did happen in this official week 0 in autonomous. And that was what I actually was kind of discussing it with people in chat at the time when it happened. What happened was in this match, 125 does their auton. They end up under the scale plate and their elevator goes up and it like punches a hole through the plate. Like before 148 revealed, we were using the phrase uppercut, but I guess now it's stolen by a different robot. But it was truly, it's so hard. This is a candidly speaking topic for a different time, but I get annoyed when there's like penalties for doing stuff in autonomous because that's so hard to control for some teams. Anyway, in chat, I'm going, wait, why didn't they foghorn this match? Like a robot is holding the scale with its arm, and its arm is literally through the scale plate. And at the for the week 0, I think it was like, yeah, let's just get through the schedule. But I think what's going to be scary is you're going to end up with teams that are spearing through the bottom of the scale in autonomous, and like, what do? Do we foghorn? Do we restart? Do we penalize? What if they're holding it in an advantage to their team? Like where is the call made that that's not a playable match? And that's where I say it's going to be too many, because you're going to have things where it's like, oh, well, maybe they hit it in autonomous and held it there, and that's pretty obvious to know that you should redo that or disable the robot and eliminate that scoring or whatever. But what about when you accidentally tap it as you're trying to do something, or they fall? There's so many different conditions to consider when touching or holding the scale that I'm pretty worried that spearing the scale is going to be too common and going to affect other matches. So we'll see. I don't know what you guys think.
It'll be interesting for sure. I think there's a lot of teams that have built tall robots that didn't really take into account, like we mentioned earlier, the fact that the scale plate is about 44 inches, the plate isn't, but the bottom of the scale itself is about 44 inches at its lowest point, and somebody else is going to take, or they're going to take control of the scale, and their partner is going to come flying by and clip the edge of it and just go toppling to the ground. So I think it'll happen frequently, especially for teams that didn't necessarily plan for it or think about it, and especially those teams that not only didn't do those things but also don't have a scale really to practice on, and don't get a chance to see those or get the perspective before they show up at their first events.
Yeah, and I mean, like, real quick, I just think it's always a hard thing whenever you have to write the rules in a way that are fair so that everyone gets treated the same throughout the season. Lenient, however, that teams who are struggling don't instantly foghorn or red card themselves for trying to do something ambitious like score on a scale in auto, versus the team who's doing something a strategic advantage or feels that they have a safety net because they'll get a foghorn if it screws up. It's a really delicate tightrope walk, and I don't envy the people who have to write the rules and the referees who have to use their discretion to try to make the best choices and not give one team an unfair advantage. So let's get back to the action. We got one more match lined up for you folks at home. Thanks for sticking with us. Evan, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I've got semifinals from the week 0 event, and this was one of the biggest examples I saw a classic, or what we hope to be a classic scale battle in the middle. And there's some really interesting strategic decisions that get made around that. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Autonomous is dead even. Neither side ends up getting their switch. 2 robots cross the line for both, and so we enter teleop with a complete even slate. And not a whole lot happens out of the ordinary at the beginning. Both alliances will go ahead and then take control of their own switch at approximately the same time. But if we skip forward to about 100 seconds left in the match, we'll see the interesting part start. So at this point, the first cube has just been scored for the blue alliance in the scale, and 319 in red thinks about going to score and then goes back to the vault. And if we pause it right here, this is an interesting strategic decision to me, because Morpheus on the blue alliance has now just placed, and you can't quite see it because it's hidden by the scale, but they've just placed the second cube on the blue scale plate. And so now there's 2 cubes to 0 at that point. And there's already a battle for the switch going on blue side. Red side's been untouched, but Bob is going back to the vault. And I think something that is a side effect of that is they've effectively lost control of the scale at this point. Morpheus is a pretty good scale bot. We've talked about them. That's 58-13 in a couple of the previous matches. Bob is about the same speed, but they're now 2 cubes behind. And neither alliance has Blue Alliance also has Airstrike, who's also good at the scale. But 319, Bob doesn't have anybody else on their alliance that can do the scale. So at this point, they're the only ones that can take back the scale. They're 2 cubes behind, and they're not a significant amount faster than their opponents. So if we play from here, we'll see this whole thing play out. We go ahead and red gets their cube in the vault, grabs another cube. Morpheus is picking up more cubes. There's a battle for the switch going on blue side. Bob puts 1 cube on the scale. Let's go ahead and pause it here. You'll notice that Airstrike has managed to push all of their power cube zones over to their side of the switch. So they're making short cycles to try and maintain control of their switch on blue side, while red is playing the every bot game to try and take it back.
That move right there to push all those, that's still legal by the rules issue, right? To clear the loot pile or
I'm not entirely
pile.
Sure that the way that happened is legal. Their partner actually did it, and they kind of plowed a few cubes over there. So I think that may be called plowing multiple cubes at that point. But regardless of how it happened, the fact that there are that many cubes right there is really benefiting Airstrike and their ability to maintain control of the switch. I think if we back it up a little bit,
I've also seen at this week 0 event, there were teams who did that with a line of cubes that are in front of the switch.
Yeah.
Which definitely is a no-no, but the way they kind of happened looked very accidental, almost like one robot pushing another into it. And all of a sudden, when the cubes are a lot closer to the scale, it really speeds things up. Or if they're moved out of the way so you can dump them in the switch, it was kind of eye-opening how helpful that was for teams.
Yeah, I had a thought about that. If you don't mind me pausing you for just a second, Evan, I had a question because at one point I was watching it. So admittedly, I was watching week 0 from school. We were building. It was almost bag day, right? And my computer at school, my work computer, does not have audio, so it was really hard to watch matches because I'd have to normally when I watch webcasts and I'm doing something else, I wait for the da 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 da, and then I run back to my computer. Couldn't hear anything. So at one point I walk back and I don't know if it probably wasn't this match, but the power cube zone being all messed up. Now I get the neutral ones, right? But from my interpretation, it was like, oh my God, I want to keep those cubes in the protected zone as long as I can and not go and goof that pile up. Yeah. So am I just very, very wrong in wanting to protect those? Or because when we first looked through, it was like, okay, neutral game object, where are they protected? And the 2 thoughts are, right, your power cube zone and your vault, right? Or at least your human player, because there was that lovely Q&A that was like, just because your human player takes it doesn't mean they have to put it in the vault. So as soon as I saw a team do that, I was like, oh, that must have been an accident. But as soon as you explained it to me, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Put it on your Switch side. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you guys have an opinion on which one is I don't know, better is the wrong word, but more advantageous.
Watching the rest of this match, I'm not 100% sure that it was intentional. That's a 54-59 that moved the cube pile, the red robot all the way on the left over there. And if you watch the rest of the match, they don't actually really have much in the way of a cube intake from the floor. And so they are actually trying to get this cube into the vault, and you can watch them go all the way around the cube, and they're literally just pushing it on the ground to try and get it over to the vault. So I think the power cube pile there being moved may have been an unintentional side effect, but it's likely that they were instructed to approach the power cube pile from that side by airstrike in order to make sure that any cubes they did push out of the way ended up in an advantageous position.
Well, and I think it's fair that the rules were written this way intentionally, so robots without mechanisms could work the cube pile. Otherwise, they'd be stuck with no way to pull it out unless they built mechanisms. It was a set of rules very fairly written to give everyone or the robot who has no mechanisms an opportunity to play the game, just the way they could last year with the gears with a simple, a mailbox envelope, shoot something on their robot. You didn't need an active mechanism, and you could be a very effective robot with just a drivetrain. I think they wanted to kind of recreate that, would be my guess, with the rules of being able to move that loop pile. But yeah, it really opens up to some cool strategic things for other robots now.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry to derail.
Go ahead. Let's go ahead and skip forward to about 64 seconds left in the match. And we already talked about the decision to go by 319 to go place the cube in the vault. At this point in the match is now just when they're starting to get more cubes onto the scale. So they've got one, they're putting two on, and this is where the scale battle really begins. But as we mentioned before, they're starting behind. They're already 50 points behind in the overall match. And that's almost purely due to the scale. The vault is even at this point. The switches are even at this point, even though one switch has been heavily focused on and the other switch has been left untouched. They're both being owned by their respective side. And let's just go ahead and play out the match from here. Airstrike's going to come in and go ahead and counter. And so even though Bob is focusing on the scale here, Blue can always stay one cube ahead. And Red is never getting an opportunity to actually gain ownership of the scale. They're only at ever best getting it to neutral position. And so we talked before about breakpoints in the match, and I think very early on some decisions really lost the scale for Red and left them in an unrecoverable position at this point. There's a few other things that happened in the match with regards to climbs and other vault stuff that result in a final score that's significantly more than just what the scale was. But when I look at this match, it really brings to light how critical the scale is and also how critical decision-making is in this game. And so what do you do at a point in the match where you've maybe made a strategic mistake unintentionally, but you recognize that you can no longer gain control of the scale? Or if you're in a similar situation where you don't have a scale robot on your alliance, but your opponent does, and you're essentially already conceding the scale before the beginning of the match, what recourse, what strategic choice do you have to do that? And one of the things that I've been struggling with is there a point in the match, and maybe is it even earlier than 80 seconds left in the match, that Red should just give up on the scale and start focusing even more of their resources on taking away their opponent's switch or filling the vault or doing something other than playing continuing to pour resources into the scale. The flip side of that being that by continuing to pour resources into the scale, they're also forcing Blue to continue to put resources into the scale. So I think there's a really interesting dynamic that shows up here, and I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are about whether Red's strategic maneuver to continue placing cubes on the scale was the correct call, even though they didn't really have the means to take it back, or if they should have maybe focused on something else to try and get a win out of the match.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your earlier question of what do you do when you're in a match where, you're clearly outgunned, or like let's say you brought up the idea of the qual match where your opponent can do scale and you can't. I doubt Tyler has it, but I want that graphic that's like lie down, try not to cry, cry a lot. That's how and it brought me on a tangent of thinking is that while we're talking about how valuable that every bot is, at the same time, if we see too many every bots, you're going to end up with every bots who experience what my team likes to call death by randomizer, which is that you end up on every single match you have no one who can do scale and someone like your opponents can. Sorry about that noise. I'm going to let Mason take this one while my dog screams out the window at night.
That's great. Yeah, it is really tough to make those kind of decisions. In some cases, you're just beat because you're going up against better robots, and there was nothing you could have ever done to change that outcome that was going to happen because of the skill set. I mean, in this game, it's going to be so important to recognize very quickly whenever you're getting beat. The other alliance is getting 2x the points that you are per second. The longer you wait to change that situation, the worse. And in a case like this where you can't keep up on the scale, they had such a good shot to take the away switch, to take their opponent's switch. The Red Alliance did. They had to neutralize one of the blue robots who kept scoring on the switch. Like, it wasn't just a one-man job over there. It turned into a two-man job. And because the Red Alliance is going after two different places, 319, Bob is scoring on the scale. I think what they needed to do was pick one target. Two teams work together to take that target back, attack together, and it will be very difficult to make a coordinated attack on, out of nowhere, basically on the fly. But that's what you got to do to get one thing back. And now the game isn't running away from you, and then you can focus on getting back to having an advantage. It's going to be really tricky out there to pull that off in real time.
I agree, and maybe this is a video game themed game, maybe to make an analogy to a popular video game, League of Legends. The idea of rotations comes into this, and I don't actually play it, but I do watch esports League of Legends, and there's this idea that you're always pressuring, you're trying to rotate your team so that you're pressuring the point where your opponent is weakest, and you gain some advantage there, and then you keep you keep your advantage that way. And then on the flip side, the appropriate response and the appropriate counter rotation to keep rotating through the objectives. And I think we'll see a similar style of play emerge this year, where alliances are making coordinated attacks on certain objectives in order to gain themselves a foothold that they can then boost off of to start regaining control of the match. The biggest difference, beyond one being a video game and the other being real life robots, is that League of Legends matches last like 30 to 45 minutes normally, and our match lasts 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So the amount of time that you have to react to that kind of stuff and to make strategic decisions is drastically reduced. But I think it'll be really interesting to watch this year. I think there's also a lot of parallels to 2014, to Aerial Assist, in terms of the role playing and in terms of counter strategies to try and disrupt what your opponents are trying to do, and be able to gain an upper edge in the match.
Absolutely. I think the idea of rotations, I also don't play League because toxicity, but in any game where there's multi roles to be played, right, is there's this idea of I actually do game a bit, but hey, like, let's figure out what our opponent's doing and match up to that. And I'm a little concerned, like you said, based on the time, that may not apply in Power Up just because you only have 2 minutes, right? In the time that you realize that you're outgunned, make up a plan on the fly, and then go to do it, are your robots actually going to be capable of making that time back up? But we'll see. I think it could be. I love the idea of reimagining what everybody's roles on the Alliance are. And again, it feeds back into that how dynamic and how interesting and how on the fly is this game and coaching specifically going to be. And it's why I am both terrified and hype.
I think this is a game that's going to see a lot of strategic innovation throughout the season, and I'm really excited for that. I think the game that we're going to be playing at Championship is going to be a completely different game strategically from the one that we play week 1, even though none of the scoring and none of the field elements have changed. This is I think going to be a really cool game to watch.
Yeah, this is really reminding the teams need to go out there and read the art of war, so they can employ that Napoleon strategy of attacking the weakest link first, finding that Achilles heel in the other alliance, and really just focusing on that first. It could be, people could get really into this. I'm really into it. So before we take questions from that match, we should give away some free stuff. Team 1720, the Fixed Gears, they are giving away a set of Bathawks. Tyler, we're going to bring him back on, our producer, and he's going to tell you guys how you can win your set of Bathawk.
I got to get prepared
Tyler.
to tell you how to win. So, no, great analysis, guys, and we're going to take some more Q&A in just a little bit from everybody. But if you're interested in winning those awesome Bathawks from Team 1720, what you're going to have to do is make sure that either you are currently subscribed or following our channel. And then you have to type in a keyword. I'm going to give a little backstory to this, and I apologize because I don't have the picture ready. But the keyword for tonight is going to be Wonderbeard, which is from Sean from 1720. His team made a awesome pixelized version of him with the incredible beard on it. So Wonderbeard is the keyword. So if you're interested in winning, make sure you go ahead and type that in as much as you'd like. You do only get one chance to win, so just keep that in mind. You can type as many times as you want, but you do only get one chance to win. Our subscribers do get 5 times luck, so good luck to everybody, and we'll do that drawing after our Q&A.
Wait, did you post the picture of the beard?
No, I'll find it. As we're doing Q&A, I'll find it, I promise.
All right.
At some point, we'll get a picture of Wonderbeard during our Q&A. Let's see how that goes. But it looks like we have some questions going forward. And I know we had talked about this. Sorry, Mason, I stole your segment.
No, it's fine.
We had talked about this a little bit planning in the show. But one of the thoughts that we were going to talk about if we had time, and I guess we do, is Dark Zach asks, what do you guys think of the stream overlay displays, i.e. real-time score and final score? I could get all sorts of candidly speaking on this, so I'm going to let you guys go first. Mason, Evan, whoever wants to go.
I feel like they always leave something to be desired. My one thing I wish is that the scores changed in unison with the clock, so that when every second that the clock was changing, the scores were updated. Instead, they change based on the fraction of a second whenever you gain possession, which is probably more fair. But to me, it really creates a visual mess whenever there are 3 different icons changing at 3 different times within a second, and it really frustrates me.
Yeah, I think there's that part for sure. That I don't think that annoyed me as much as it may have other people, but it certainly doesn't look as clean as having everything change at the same time in sync. I think the two aspects that I really wish were a little bit different. The way that the power-ups are displayed, you don't know what level the power-up was played at, right? Because it turns the alliance color either blue or red when the power-up is played, but the number counter continues to count the number of cubes that's in that station. So it could be played at 1. You could play boost at 1 and then put 2 more cubes in the boost thing, and it'll display the same as if you played boost at 3, even though from a point standpoint it's different. And I really wish that there was maybe a little kind of a counter on the side that indicates the scoring rate of each alliance. And I think that kind of goes a little bit along with what Mason was saying in terms of it being a little bit out of sync. That I think it would help a lot if you had a little, +1, +2 per second, thing on the side that says, okay, this is the rate that they're gaining points at, because especially if they're not all in sync, it's next to impossible to look at that visually at the scoring display and see who's gaining and who's not. And you can always look at the field to try and decipher that information. But I really prefer all of that to also be available on the score display. That being said, I think overall, for the amount of information that they need to be able to display this year, the scoring display is pretty well put together, and it looks really nice. I had some concerns before we saw them about how the power-ups were going to be indicated, and I think overall it's a fairly satisfactory solution. But there's a couple minor tweaks that, as a longtime firster, and I know talking to others, and especially drive coaches, that would really like to be able to get more information about exactly what the game state is at any given time.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I totally agree that I don't know if I could design something better to display all this information at the same time. But from a coaching perspective, there is so much changing at too many points within 1 second, and there's so many different places to look. And you guys covered that super well. The thing that I really don't like, and I have a graphic design background, and I've been doing FRC for a very long time, I cannot deal with the yellow background. It is so distracting. The squares are not square. Okay, can we?
The cubes aren't cubes either.
Producer Tyler, I would like my own candidly speaking about this. No guests, it's just me yelling about this for an
I will
hour.
100% join you on that, because I personally, I'm sorry, it looks very FTC-ish, which it's not bad, but it just confuses me a little bit, and it's way just too bright and vivid, and just yeah.
Yeah.
See,
All
I didn't
right.
even notice.
Triggered, guys. Okay, so
The yellow bugs me, but the thing that also a little bit annoys me, and I did mention this on Chief Delphi, is the screen that we're currently looking at over here. The score screen. What bothers me, I love that it's like, get it guys, first power up, video games, arcade machine. But think about this exact screen on like a tiny projector screen in the back corner of the gym. Like, this is gonna look really, really cool on a very large, like, LED backlit screen at a large event. But when you get to a small venue event, I'm not even trying to think about like the size or the production value of the event, but the size of the event. And typically, I can speak to my experiences in our districts, is we end up with projector screens like up against cinder block walls in a gym, and that gym has all their lights on, so that projector is washed out. And so this is the color difference, like the red brick against the red score screen, the tiny print. I wish what they could do is, you know how we had the little animation of, like, I know everybody hated them at the time, but the animation of like the airships moving along. If we could have this screen and then it like zoom in to what the screen says. That's all I want, is this screen just as the transition, and then you can see the whole score and all of the match information breakdown within that screen. That is what I would probably prefer as far as the overall look. So that's, sorry, I ranted. I can't help it. It bugs me a little bit. But I think we have a couple more questions, but I know we want to give away these Bathawks too, so we'll sort of lightning round through it. And a couple of questions relate to a triple climb. So one of them is, what do you think the feasibility of, I'm going to combine them. What do you think the feasibility of a non-ramp or power-up triple climb? So that is 3 individual climbs. What do you think that the feasibility of that is? And then the other question is that worth it? I actually, I will be short. When I saw the size of the bar, I laughed that they expected 3 robots to climb. But it became pretty obvious as reading through the manual that they were trying to encourage the 2007 style, like lift, ramp, buddy climb, something that they don't necessarily think that 3 robots are going to go up that. So I'm not sure that I'm sure it'll happen at some point, but I'm not sure that's going to be the best, most efficient choice of gameplay.
Yeah, I took one look at it and said, if the lifter rules were different, like if levitate wasn't a thing, or if everyone had to be not touching the ground, that teams would solve this problem. They would build grappling hooks, or hooks and string deploys, like a 148 solution, so that they could all move out of the way, and teams would get creative and they would do it. But because they didn't emphasize that or make that a rule, and I think it's really cool that they didn't. I love the way the end game works this year. I don't think we'll ever see 3 robots individually hang on there. It's just there's not enough robots out there who specialized in tiny hangs because levitate. They all looked at it and said, "Oh, we'll always get a levitate." So we're not gonna put that much effort into it.
Yeah, I think there's probably a combination of 3 robots out there that could do it, but
Definitely,
the chance
yeah.
that those 3 robots ever end up in a match together is super low. I think the triple climb with one robot lifting 2 partners, I really like that solution. It's a very technically challenging solution to get right, and I'm not sure that it's necessarily a surefire thing. But I do like that it simplifies the game for those teams that did design for that a little bit, and that they don't have to get the vault in order to guarantee the ranking point, right? That they can focus on the switch, focus on the scale, kind of ignore the vault in their matches, and just try and get 2 robots to go up on them. And if they happen to have a partner who's a switch or a vault specialist, or, that can take care of one of those aspects, then they're better off for it, and maybe they only do a double lift as opposed to a triple lift. But I do see the value in not using the levitate and giving yourself the option to focus on the 3 contestable scoring elements, as I'll call them, and leave the vault alone in matches where you need to simplify things down in order to guarantee a win and be able to get the ranking point as well.
Yeah. So I have one question that I think is going to be interesting to talk about, and then another that kind of circles back and wraps us up. So the first one is, this comes from JCB486 in the chat. It's, what is the magic number of cubes that will win any switch or scale week 1? That's all of them. Put all the cubes from the field on one scoring objective. Congratulations, you have guaranteed.
Yeah, 4.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely 4.
All right.
I'm going to go a little bit higher, I think. I'm going to say 6. I think once you get that first level on there, we talked a little bit earlier about the difficulty increase of getting a second layer of cubes on there. And I think, 1 level is enough to at least week 1 guarantee that your opponent isn't going to take it back, even if they do manage to neutralize it. So I'm going to go with 6.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we've already talked about kind of how the level stuff is going to work. And I think by the time you've covered 1 level, you're going to get teams who are like, nah, well, we can't do that. We can't come back from that. Let's move along. And then I think what our final question is going to be before that giveaway. So remember, if you want to win the giveaway, you type Wonderbeard in the chat for a set of Bathawks. Our Wonderbeard. Tyler, start trying to troll me. Wonderbeard or Wonderbreard, if you're Tyler typing, is the last question before we get to the giveaway is, what is the weakness of the Everybot? And I'm assuming that means like not including the fact that it just can't do the scale, right? Like, what are other weaknesses of the Everybot? I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that one.
Well, it doesn't do the switch from the ground. Its intake is fixed on the ground, so it doesn't. If it's playing near at home, it doesn't have the ability to pick one up and drop it in the switch. It has to put it into the exchange, and then the exchange drops it into the bucket. And I think that would be its. If I were going to recommend a team build an Everybot, that's where I would ask them to build the Everybot as it is first. They've got lots of good resources on the Robonauts website to make that robot, and then try to upgrade it to pick up a cube off the ground and get it into the switch.
Yeah, I think it's the Everybot is a really, really impressive robot for what it is, but it isn't a true vault and switch specialist. It's a vault specialist and an opponent switch specialist, but it leaves your own switch a little bit more vulnerable, because if you do want to put cubes in that, you have to do essentially full field cycles from the portal. So that's the biggest weakness. Also, You know, we did, you know, you did mention it, but the inability to do the scale is a very big weakness. You know, and I think it may be obvious that that's a big weakness, but trying to overcome the lack of not being able to do a single scoring element, it's not the kind of robot that's necessarily going to be able to control its destiny in most matches. It's going to be a solid contributor and a very desirable partner, but it's not a robot that's going to go out and win every match just on the back of you know, portal cycles and vault.
No, I think those super valid points. I think the greatest thing about the Everybot was, you know, hey, here's like a great starting point, and from here you could be super contributing. So Mason, I liked your advice of, you know, take that and go forward with it, not just dead copy it. I think that'll be really helpful for teams.
All right, so before we wrap up, let's give away our Badhawks. Tyler, who is going to be our lucky winner today?
All right, winner for today is It's Suspicio. Congratulations. So you won the Badhawks. Yay, party time. So following since March 4th, 2017, and a subscriber, congratulations. Let's get a bunch of rigged emotes in chat because we totally rigged it for It's Suspicio. Congratulations. Make sure you shoot me a direct message or private message in Twitch or on Facebook so we can get your information. And thanks again, by the way, the 1720 for continuing to give away these awesome Badhawks. These guys, if you didn't win, guys, go on to AnyMark and check them out because they're really cool. And honestly, not getting too pitchy or selly, but they're a really good price point too. So make sure you pick up a set of those for competition.
All right, thank you very much, Tyler. So that pretty much wraps up our first episode of the competition season for FUNalysis. Libby, thank you so much for being an awesome analyst and coming on. What's going on with the Midnight Adventures these days? And maybe you have some news about something new on Fun?
Yes, so Midnight Inventors are doing awesome. We're actually hosting FTC State Championship in our house this weekend, which you know, busy week, but it's been okay. We're going to start out at Palmetto Regional, and I know my kids are super hype. I think we might even be dropping a reveal soon, potentially tonight. I have to check in on how they're doing, but we'll see how that goes. And then as far as fun shows, I'm actually going to be a part of the Northeast region recap group. So I know Tyler's got a lot of information coming down the pike for that very soon, but basically we're going to cover the different areas in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, New England, all sorts of stuff, and talk about all the awesome teams that we can showcase for our region.
It's definitely exciting. Evan, also, thank you very much to you for coming on the show. Great work tonight. What's going on with Apex Robotics, and what can we expect to come from RSN during the competition season this year?
Yeah, Apex is doing great. We did full power-up systems test on our CompBot before it went in the bag, which is the first time we've ever done that. You know, got some work to do, but really looking forward. We're heading down to Oregon for Clackamas District Week 1. So coming up real quickly. I think we released a teaser a couple weeks ago, and a full reveal is probably coming on Monday along with our public community reveal. So that's really awesome. It's been a super fun season, and I think it's a pretty unique robot. I'm really, really excited to show it off. And then RoboSports Network, we've got our first episode of Game Sense Season 5. I can't believe it's already been 5 seasons. Coming next Wednesday, which is the 28th, February 28th. At 6 p.m., and that's on twitch.tv/RoboSportsNetwork. So I hope to see everybody there for Season 5, Episode 1. Should be a lot of fun.
Evan, that's 6 p.m. Pacific then?
Sorry, yes. I'm Pacific time zone. 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. This is why we make Francis do this stuff.
Absolutely. Hey guys, make sure you check out RSN too. They're a great show and a great network, and we're happy to be partnering with them to bring you FUNalysis.
Yeah, and I've had the opportunity to visit the Apex shop a couple times this season. They invited me over, and I've really been super impressed with what they're doing. So, Evan, I'm really excited for you to share with the world the robot that you guys have built. I think it's a really cool one. So let us know what you guys thought about the show on Discord, Facebook, Chief Delphi, whatever else, other things are out there, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. So we can continue to make this content for you and make sure that it's something that you enjoy watching and something that you're learning from and that you want to participate in. We'll be back with FUNalysis next month. We're going to be covering regionals and district events at that point, which I am most excited about. I've been waiting very long for competition season to start back up. It's my favorite time of year. check out Fun premiere night coming up. Reveal videos are all the rage this year. We've got over 50 teams, including some big wigs like 16 Baxter Bomb Squad, 359 Hawaiian Kids, 973 Great Bot, 987 High Rollers, 1676, 1678 Citrus Circuits, and 2481. Wow, that's a really nice list. And they're all going to be presenting their robots and reveal videos. That's going to be starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. We have tons of giveaways on premiere night, including a Robo Rio from National Instruments, more backhawks, and even apparels from the teams that are presenting. There's going to be great commentary. It's really going to be worth checking out. It's become one of the hot nights in FIRST that everyone tunes in for. On behalf of myself, for Libby, Evan, and our producer, Tyler, I would like to thank you all for tuning in. And thank you all. Thanks to our moderators in chat for keeping those rigged comments at bay. We'll see you guys next time on Fun, and I'll talk to you then.